Washington, D.C.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Foo, Innovator and Residence at the Library of Congress, and you just heard a preview of the incredible DJ Kid Koala spinning tracks by creators from across the country who remixed audio materials from your Library of Congress. So this past year, I had the pleasure to work with the Library of Congress on a project sponsored by LC Labs called Citizen DJ, which invites the public to make new hip-hop music using free-to-use audio and video materials from the library. So today you'll be hearing from creators and organizations from across the country who've been using Citizen DJ, as well as hearing a full mega mix, aka beat tape, performed by Kid Koala that showcases all that new work. So before we start, I just want to share a bit about what inspired Citizen DJ. The project really started from my love of hip hop at a young age, particularly the four elements of hip hop: MCing, DJing, b-boying and b-girling, or breakdancing, and graffiti. I've been a b-boy for over 2 decades, and I love how the dance form is kind of this essentially like a remix of a number of references like capoeira, kung fu, gymnastics, African dance, jazz. And I've always been fascinated by how hip-hop music itself also samples from other eras and other genres, transforming them into something new. And I was drawn to this idea of the DJ as this collector and remixer of sounds. And there's this term called like crate digging, where DJs would literally be digging through crates in the basements of record stores and thrift shops, looking for the most obscure sounds from other eras and other genres, and then transforming into something fresh and new. So I've had the pleasure to work with LC Labs and library staff to think about how we can curate and expand this collective crate of sonic culture that anybody can use for free and without restriction, particularly with sounds that might be aesthetically, culturally, and historically significant. And the result is Citizen DJ, a public resource that you can access right now. And you can quickly browse thousands of samples from hundreds of hours of audio from all different eras, all different genres. And then you could remix these sounds and add beats directly in your browser and download any sample to use in your own music production software for free and without restriction. Hey, so thanks for everybody for being here. Maybe you could start by just introducing yourselves, telling us a little bit about your organizations, and maybe talk a little bit about what drew you to Citizen DJ, and maybe as like a fun little question, what is your favorite sample? I know that's a little difficult, so we'll give you time to think about that, but or maybe like one of your favorite samples to make it a little easier.
Wow. Sure. So Rashard Dobbins, what up though, everybody? How are you doing? We're Class at Detroit. We are a nonprofit organization here in the heart of the city of Detroit. We're mobile. And what we do is we use the 5 elements. We focus on the main 4, but we're educators. We're an organization founded by 2 educators. So, of course, knowledge, right, is the pinnacle for us. And we use that in all of the elements. But we really use it, to promote equity. Right, which is, what this hip hop is really designed to do and where it comes from. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to, link up with other organizations that are moving the movement forward, right?
So how did you connect with Citizen DJ?
So, first of all, Citizen DJ is an amazing resource. So, it's somebody who DJs, it's somebody who, leads organization along with my co-founder, Adriana. We love hip hop, right? We're students of hip hop, even though we're teachers. And, to see a resource that allows us to do, what those who are part of, hip hop culture do best, which is upcycle and recycle art, right? And history and have a time capsule, right? We dig, Citizen DJ, especially in the times that we're in now, right? Being able to dig through this plethora, right, of amazing film recordings and interviews, right? It just drew us, I say. Citizen DJ, drew us in, especially as a resource for our students.
You got a favorite sample?
There's no way I can answer that.
Okay.
There's absolutely no way. There's no way.
All right, I'll allow you to skip that.
Yeah.
Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie Louis-Scheer. I'm the Executive Director of PAP, Preserving, Archiving, and Teaching Hip Hop. We are a nonprofit based in Miami, Florida, but we also do work in Washington State and Arizona through one of our partners, specifically setting up studios in treatment facilities to support folks who are overcoming addictions, to use lyrics and also songwriting and recording as an alternative to talk therapy. But our work in Miami focuses on work with youth, community, also substance abuse prevention and intervention, and then we also have an archiving and preservation arm. Yeah, we're super excited to be a part of the project, and just grateful that we were sent an email with the beta release, and reached out actually to Brian directly about the product, the platform, and we appreciate you bringing us into this project.
Amazing to work with you as well.
Oh, and the Music Rocks Project. I love the Music Rocks Project. As a woman in the culture, although my role is primarily administrative, in my previous life, I was a creator, and I'm a closet creator. But the majority of my work is sort of supporting creatives in their journey to understand themselves as creators, also as servants to the public using their artwork. But I love the Music Box collection because it highlights the contributions of women in the arts, and I think it's really important across the arts ecosystem, but particularly in hip hop, to introduce the voices of other sisters and make sure that young women have role models, and also that brothers understand that our voices are important and crucial and critical, and that they need to be included and a part of the work. So
amazing. Hey, Caesar, how you doing?
Hey, my name's DJ Antonio Caesar Rickett. You know what I'm saying. You can @ that and follow me on Instagram. But yeah, I represent Solidarity Studios. As I mentioned, I'm a DJ, but also producer and educator. And shout out to Citizen DJ, shout out to Brian, shout out to John, shout out to the whole team for creating such an amazing tool. You know, there's so many people in our community who want to learn beat making and music making. A lot of them are beginners of all ages, from a variety of different nonprofit organizations and communities in Chicago, in Palestine, in Ghana, all over the world. We're an international organization. And this tool was just such a great way to like get started. And then for what I'd like noticed in the workshops for more advanced users, like the fact that this is a whole library, you know, free of royalty use, was just super exciting for those who, you know, were advanced. So, you know, big shout out to your team. One of the main things that Solidarity Studios does is, you know, we partner with nonprofit organizations and donate mobile studios so that we can uphold, you know, storytelling in communities that need to tell their stories. And we also do a variety of other programming, right? Whatever involves solidarity, right? That's where we're there, right? When there's exchange programs from colleges for students who want to work with nonprofits in Chicago, we'll do that. If we need to move resources, we'll do that. So, you know, we're a wide range, but on the music end, you know, that's what we do. And one like really exciting thing is that we have a virtual music competition coming up in Ghana. And so that's our next move. Yeah. And, you know, since I'm a DJ, I got to represent those samples. I would say my favorite sample is Fun in the Bakery. Yeah, I think it's named Fun in the Bakery. And I made a little juke beat to it. So that was like really fun. Shout out to Detroit. Someone here is from Detroit. Yeah. Hey, Juke in house. That's where it's at.
Juke and techno in house.
Techno, yeah.
Juke and techno.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, FYI, Fun in the Bakery is a Citizen DJ sample. That's from, I think, the Edison record. So that's like almost like over 100 years old, maybe. So yeah.
See, if you ask me library, see, that's easier. See, Jay, like Natalie did it right.
True. You gotta focus it, right?
She said the whole library. I'm like, okay, if you ask me that sample, goodness. I mean, it's just.
I feel like it's impossible to narrow it down because there's so many.
Yeah,
I know.
It's just
impossible. It's impossible.
At least from like Citizen DJ, for me, that's Fun in the Bakery. But also from like, you know, going back to the federal government, from the Smithsonian Folklife Records, they have a sample called Eddie Chody. And that's one of my other favorite ones.
Yeah. Yeah, the Joe Smith library is amazing. Right, the interviews. Smokey Norfolk, not Smokey Norfolk, Smokey Robinson, right, is in there. Which, of course, for us, right, we're right down the street from Hillsville, from Motown. So yeah.
Speaking of sampling from the library, I think that's a good segue to introduce John and what he does.
Hello, good to see everyone. My name's John Fenn. I'm the head of research and programs here at the American Folklife Center, which is one of 20-odd reading rooms, research centers at the Library of Congress. 76 by an act of Congress, the American Folklife Preservation Act, and that set us up to preserve and present folklife in all its diversity. And Citizen DJ really speaks to that in multiple ways. I think the preservation, all the collections you're talking about, the Music Box Project, the Edison Project, so many of those are about preserving recorded sound and moving image for use by the public, by you all. The presentation is what Citizen DJ encourages people to do with it, right? To make new work. So I got connected to Citizen DJ when I met Brian, when he started as Innovator in residence, and he came down to the Folklife Center, through connections with LC Labs, and he started describing his project, and we said, yeah, we want to be involved. So we worked with him, a bunch of the staff here worked with him to find collections that would fit the free to use mantra of this, so people could have access to these samples and then, listen to the 1 to 2 second bits, but also dig deeper into the collections. And so again, the Music Box collection and then the American English dialect recordings collections. Those are two of the sample banks from the American Folklife Center that are in Citizen DJ, and these represent such a rich sort of body of heritage. In many ways, Citizen DJ sort of is kind of a, fulfilling the 21st century mission of the Folklife Center, I think. And it's just been really exciting to go along on the journey to meet you all and to work with your creators and your organizations. It's been fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, my favorite sample. Well, it's not really the kind of a sample as you would usually think of a sample, but like a personal one for me growing up was in Enter the Wu-Tang. The sample of like the 1980s Hong Kong kung fu film. I think it was like Shaolin and Wu-Tang. So like, the whole kind of aesthetic and also just like the whole philosophy of like kind of the Wu-Tang Clan is like, derivative of it also the English dubbed version, which is like, it kind of hits on all the different layers of like transformation and like reference. And like, for me, it kind of made like the whole Chinese thing like cool, which like representation in like the 90s and like, Chinese wasn't that. So absolutely. That was mine. I'm happy, Rashard, you brought up the fifth element of hip-hop knowledge, knowledge of history, knowledge of self. I think that's exactly where this intersection is between, hip-hop and the Library of Congress.
Absolutely.
Just to hear like how you kind of think of that directly.
Oh man. How much time we have, right? Like, that's where we live. I mean, Class at Detroit, we officially founded in 2017, but it really dates back to the co-founder's time in the classroom, right? We teach at, schools, schools that are 99.9%, right, people of color, and have this rich heritage that oftentimes is hidden, right? I mean, for knowledge of self is everything. What you see in the classroom from the classroom standpoint and being the culturally relevant educator, you're validating someone's culture. You're bringing that into the room, into the space, right? You're honoring who you are. You don't have to be a zebra and necessarily change your stripes, right? So it's like, okay, cool. For instance, for us, being educators here in Detroit, we're able to bring in Marvin Gaye and Stevie and Michael, right? Or the Clark sisters in the gospel back, right? But these are also the same things that our students' aunts and great aunts and uncles are playing, right? So, knowledge is key. It's key. And I mean, you can go through Citizen DJ, but you can go through any sample for that matter, and just learn history, like you just said, Brian. I mean, we actually do a course here in the city in the summertime where we dig through popular lyrics and we pull out the ACT and the SAT words. And that's just like one example of how we can do that through hip hop, right? you know, through various artists, whether it's, you know, somebody who's ultra popular, like a Drake, or, you know, a Joey Bad, right? Like, you know, we can easily do that we can get you on any level, but then we can get, you know, really into the inferential questions, like what are they referring to? What are they getting into? So for us, I mean, hip hop starts there. Like, that's really what fills our organization, is that knowledge piece, right? Even if it's mastering the turntables, or, you know, mastering rhyme schemes and things of that nature, right? Knowledge is what to me really brings it all together. And of course, community, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the missions of the library is to build a universal body of knowledge and wisdom that can be accessed by everyone, right? And I think that resonates so clearly with what you're talking about, the representation too, and thinking about just in the Folklife Center and our, you know, relatively contained holdings amidst the library's massive catalog. Sure. You know, we have all this knowledge. It's intergenerational, as you were talking about. It's about representing everyday culture and identity practices. And it's about the wisdom of applying that knowledge to sort of to becoming who you are, whether you're an artist or a creator or a teacher or a farmer, or I mean, you know, it's everything.
And if I could build onto that, I mean, right, accessing the creative economy, right? Like there's definitely, as we talk about representation in the creative economy, you know, there's a disconnect, right? So hip hop, right, and music, right, it gives that representation, right? When you learn the art form of production, right, of emceeing, of breaking, right, you're gaining access into the creative economy, which then, right, you know, can change your entire world, right? It allows you access to something that maybe you didn't do. If you're a graffiti writer and, you know, you learn graphic design as well, I mean, it's absolutely, representation matters, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that kind of reminds me of you know, Path. You know, your multiple things. Like, one is like kind of this idea of like the arc of history, and or as you call, like, our history, and also how we use the four elements of hip hop. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're actually using Citizen DJ as a part of a project that was originally called Miami Our Story. And we have over time replaced history with our story, capital O-U-R, just to point to the fact that the stories that we tell are a part of a bigger story. And one of the things that's really powerful for us is that, you know, hip hop is self-referential for specifically Black and brown youth, who make up the majority of the population that we serve also in Miami. It's just part of the demographic. Because when they are engaging in the elements, it's not just what we bring to the mix, but that they're able to reference social dances that are familiar to them because they've seen these dances in their home and are able, like you said, to follow the arc of history. The social dances that they saw their abuela doing at home growing up, they're able to then sort of look at that as a part of the evolution of B-boy, B-girl culture. You know, sound clash culture out of Jamaica, that's really a critical part of how we teach about hip hop culture. It doesn't begin in the Bronx, although that is the birthplace of hip hop as a culture, but because it has its foundations in cultures to which many of our young creatives belong, it's really powerful for them to go home, learn about the story, and bring their personal stories to the mix. So we really build not just on the historical foundation of hip hop, but really encourage young people to insert themselves into those stories. And even if they don't necessarily come from families that are reflected in the roots of hip hop culture, they know someone that does. And that gives them the opportunity to reach out and begin to do that primary source research, to ask questions of the folks around them, and you know, become creators of knowledge, become historians themselves through the process of excavation and you know, just placing themselves on a timeline, and really encouraging them also to recognize that they're standing on the shoulders of not just the folks in hip hop culture, but it builds connection with their families. You know, it builds connection to the folks that are part of their communities. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that I've heard a lot from you all. I think in the very beginning, we were asking like, oh, what age groups do you serve and things like that. And I think it became very clear very quickly that it's all about intergenerational kind of like knowledge sharing. And Caesar, yourself, you were a student that became a teacher, you know. So I'd be interested to kind of just hear specifically about, you know, how your organization might be structured to kind of facilitate this intergenerational collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, it's definitely very intergenerational. We have uncles, aunts, aunties. But if you're a young person, you're saying that. But if you're an older person in the organization, you have, you know, nieces, nephews. But I think Solidarity Studios does a good job of creating like a mentorship network of, you know, for everybody who just comes into these workshops. You know, there's always those students who are like just like about it, right? They're like, yo, I'm in this 100%, and you know, we leave room for mentorship for those students. And I was one of them at first, right? I was one of them, and because of like my investment and like I continue to make music, and not only I continue to make music, but I had mentors that did not only encourage me but supported me, right? Connected me to grants, connected me to opportunities. Like without my mentors, I wouldn't be here where I am today, just even on this call, which is like so amazing to be on. Like, so I think that's like one of the biggest parts of like of the intergenerational talk is like about mentorship and where that can bring youth. And oh, excuse me, I'm getting. And one other thing that I wanted to mention, just to jump off, you know, the past conversation, is you know, like I've been looking into a word recently, and it's called Sankofa. And with Sankofa, it's Ghanaian, it's a Khan, and I done some work in Ghana, and it means it's not taboo to fetch what is at risk of being left behind, or it's not taboo to go back into history and to revisit those things, because there's knowledge we can pull right from that and that we can learn from. So I've just really been exploring that right now, and like even there's this one sample where there's these kids just like singing and playing a game. And what I've done, you know, I edited that sample and I actually put my own voice in there, and I was like playing the game with them. So I was playing a game with these kids from like, I don't know how long ago in South America. And like, that just puts me into this mode where I can learn from the youth too at that moment. You know, what might have they felt playing that game? Like I felt that, you know, this is like spiritual too. This is emotional too when you engage with this stuff. But it's also like getting your mind to that. How can we attune ourselves to like get in that mindset of like engaging for those reasons, right? Because I also find myself, I'm a DJ. I want people to have fun too. Just don't want everything to be about learning, right? So how can I make a really dope beat and at the same time, you know, put that history in it too? But yeah, I think that covers a little bit about the intergenerational talk.
We're about at time.
Wait a minute, it's over?
Yeah,
We need to have.
we just got started, right?
I know.
Come on, we're talking about hip hop, baby. Come on.
Rashard, listen, I think we figured out the next steps. We definitely need to host, whether it's quarterly or something else, just a reasoning where we just keep
Listen.
it going.
Oh, yeah, there's so much going on across everything y'all do. Yeah.
Listen, movements beat moments. So, you know, last time I checked, the movement will always continue, right? Moments are fleeting, and we're only here for you know, but a small, short amount of time. But the movements can always continue, and I think that's what all of us are doing, and I think that's what the library, right, Citizen DJ is doing. We're saying, hey, to the younger generations, like we're player coaches right now. Eventually, we'll just be coaches, and they'll be the ones scoring the touchdown, right? But right now, we're trying to help get to each first down. So, for sure, movements be moments, and we definitely, you know, have to be a united front, and continue to work together for sure.
Yeah, coach, put me in.
Yeah, right.
Citizen DJ Library of Congress.
Thank you
all.
Possible.
Thank you guys.
Our honor.
Sort of standing with us as a culture and sort of preserving cultural heritage material and making sure that that's available to the public, and sort of giving us access to enrich the work that we're doing by pointing to the story, the collective story that's humanity, that we just
absolutely
forget, or that gets dismissed or written out. So thank you for that.
It's our library, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
your library.
Your library.
Thank you all. This has been super fun. I'm surprised it's over too.
So as part of our collaboration with your 3 amazing organizations, we asked creators to create some new music using samples from Citizen DJ and the Library of Congress. So instead of just playing them back here, we thought it'd be much more fun to ask the incredible DJ Kid Koala to make almost like a mix of remixes. For those of you who don't know Kid Koala, he's an extremely skilled and creative scratch DJ. I know him personally from one of my favorite collaborations in Deltron 3030. He's also toured with my favorite hip hop group, Tribe Called Quest, as well as Radiohead, the Beastie Boys, and DJ Shadow. If you check out his work, he kind of embodies the spirit of this project in his innovative and surprising use of samples and diverse references from vaudeville to blues to rock and hip hop. So it is my pleasure to introduce Kid Koala and his Innercity beat tape, and after the performance, we'll hear more from him and the creators.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
straight leg. Stand on straight leg. Stand on straight leg. Stand on straight leg. Ankles, 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 stand on.
fake, don't get fake this, it don't this 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 fake, don't get fake this.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
All right, that was awesome. Now I'm joined by Kid Koala himself and 4 of the creators who are featured in this mix. So we have Alyssa and Alina representing Detroit and Class Act Detroit. We have LaCroix Ryans, aka Mr. Lee, representing El Paso, Texas and Solidarity Studios, and Anthony Tonic Reyes, representing Miami and Path. So that was an amazing set. It's kind of this like amazing like idea of, you know, kind of going from what was a lot of cases samples of like things that were over 100 years old that came from these like you know, discs that were on like phonograph players that were transformed into a digital format, and then kind of transformed again by the creators, and then like transformed again onto like a physical form in your vinyl, and then kind of transformed again into this like digital piece. So I wanted you to kind of share a little bit about like your Kid Koala, like your kind of idea behind this piece, like particularly around like how this kind of like future, you know, these kind of like future aliens like discovering these kind of like sounds.
I mean, for me, I've just been scratching since I was 12 years old, and vinyl is still my formatted choice. And so when I was invited to do this mix, I kind of treated it like, once I heard the beats that all the participants had made, there were so many great styles and different moods happening that I said, okay, well, we're just gonna compile it all. I think there was 40 of them, 40 tracks. I had 20 minutes, so I kind of just approached it more like it was a beat tape, but in like an intercity beat tape from all these producers. And I cut everything to vinyl because I have a record cutter downstairs. So I took the files and I cut onto actual place. And then once I had them on the records, then I could just sort of.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so we are joined by 4 of those creators today. And, you know, this wasn't really planned, but, you know, in our previous discussion, we talked about the importance of kind of this intergenerational kind of collaboration. And, you know, we have probably at least 3 different decades represented here, if not more.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. You know, and also kind of listening to, you know, or kind of hearing about some of your backgrounds. That's like another kind of aspect that we talked about previously, this idea of innovation through kind of the combination of all different art forms. So I'd be interested for you all to kind of introduce yourselves, but kind of talk about your interest outside of music that might kind of influence your music making. Maybe we could start with, let's say, Anthony. And you're muted.
Thank you. Hello. I'm going to say hi to this. So I'm Anthony Reyes, go by Tonic from Miami. I am a computer scientist along with a musician. I've been playing music since I was a wee boy, and I'm a professional beatboxer. So inside of music and hip hop, like it grows more than just the music itself. And I don't know, I love music production, and I love software engineering in a terms where I can fiddle with my sounds inside of Ableton and Maxim SP, anything that I can do inside of hard software. I have some cool hardware too, but yeah.
Definitely going to ask you to show us some skills. What about you, Alina and Alyssa?
Oh, okay. Hi. Oh, hi, I am Alina. Let me see. I just got into making music a little while ago, but my main skill has mostly to do with art and video games and sculpting and stuff like that. I actually want to be a game designer when I get older. That music might help me make my own soundtrack or something. I hope so. Your turn.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I didn't really know I wanted to do music until before we joined Class Act Detroit. They brought this turntable to the library, and we started playing with it for about hour and a half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we found we had some real talent with it, and it was really fun too. So then a couple months later, we ended up actually joining Class Act Detroit, and then we started taking the classes, and we really ended up liking the musical portion of it. So I guess that was really when I got into music, liking to mix it and stuff.
And if it's not obvious to the audience, Alina and Alyssa are twins. Also, shout out to your original album art, which is amazing.
Thank Thank you.
Yeah, definitely multidisciplinary, multi-talented.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee, Mr. Lee, how about you introduce yourself?
My name is LaCroix Ryans. Students here at where I teach in El Paso they know me as Mr. Lee. I teach at a school called Canyon Hills Middle School. It's in the northeast side of El Paso, which is where I was born and raised. I went to school at New Mexico State University, which is really important because that's where I actually, as soon as I got there in '99, I was living in northern New Mexico for an internship over the summer, and I heard of a radio show called Street Beat with two guys, Garrett and Leo. And I remember it was the first time I ever heard a college radio show. Up to that point, I mean, I knew of like Yo MTV Raps, growing up watching BT Rap City with Big Les. I'm just a super fan as a kid, going all the way back to the tapes, Wu-Tang tapes when I was in middle school and all that stuff. So when I heard this underground radio show, though, that was my first time getting connected to DJs that made music and that made mixes, and it just inspired me. I remember that summer I told them, man, when I go back down to southern New Mexico to my school, I'm going to start a radio show. And I didn't know how to mix. I didn't know how to do any of that, but I just jumped into it and started doing a radio show. And I started meeting more creators, more beat makers. Hey, man, can you play my music? Hey, can you play my tape? And then when I started jumping into education, when I started working with kids at alternative schools and in juvenile centers, then it started to turn into something else because I had this radio show and they were like, oh, well, can you play what I create? And then I started meeting beat makers and started kind of seeing the ins and outs of like, just how they were making beats when technology started to take that turn, and you started to see like software like Fruity Loops. And I mean, I remember I had an emulator on Nintendo, and one day I made a beat on it in my dorm room, and I had invited all my classmates to come check it out because I was like, I made a beat, and it was just, you know, it was so funny to see their reaction because they were like looking at me like, nah, you know, that's not a beat, bro. Like that beat is kind of trash, you know. But they were just trying to be nice, you know. They were like, yeah, that's pretty good, you know, it's all right. But I knew what it was, but I was just excited because I was like, man, I actually like created something. So I just kind of stayed in my lane, you know, super fan of my students. Whatever they needed, I try to get it for them so that they can make and create and so that I could archive and share, you know what I mean? So I had access to a radio show, so I would play it, had access to classrooms. I'd use it in my teaching. Right now, actually, you know, all of this inspired a lot of the Today's Future Sound work. It inspired us to do, just yesterday, we had about 12 students in a Zoom room. Since we're all doing virtual learning right now, we started a program called Cobra Beats at our school. We're the Canyon Hills Cobras. And so there's like just tons of kids. They're using Beat Lab, running around. It just got overwhelming. You know, I kind of had to let them know I need to, you know, do that on this hour because, you know, we got to teach and all that stuff too, because it'll easily take over. You know, just even today, you know, we checked in the class and they were asking, you know, hey, mister, what's up with those beats? You gonna play those beats before class starts? And because we'll play it in the Zoom. And I'm like, oh, chill. You know, we got a geography presentation to get ready for. You know, so, but they're so excited, and I'm excited. And even in the situation we're in, even though we can't connect, we're just so happy to be able to connect on that level. So when I heard about this program, I was like, man, I want to be a student. You know, I want to try to learn for once and be taught and get some guidance on what y'all are doing. And so the Citizen DJ is just a whole nother level. I've been wanting to connect with the Library of Congress for a while. I heard about Brian Foo like months ago, and I remember telling myself, I hope I get a chance to learn more about it somehow, some way. And it happened. So, and here I am now in front and watching him talk. So I saw him in the article and now I'm here. So that's cool. That's dope.
No, I'm so glad you're here too. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I think one thing I'd be interested to kind of hear from everybody is, you know, like what types of technologies do you use? I think just because we're kind of across a bunch of different generations, you know, like hip hop is all about innovation. It's all about kind of pushing the boundaries, especially, you know, as the next generation comes. I'm curious to know what is everybody's setup. We could start with, let's start with Kid Koala. What are you rocking?
You want me to talk about my setup?
Or I don't.
Mix I just
sure. Yeah, let's start with that.
That was Technics 1200 turntables and a Rain MPAP mixer. It's kind of my go-to live setup. Is the one I've been using.
All right, we have a couple nodding heads.
Decades now.
That's awesome. What about you, Anthony? What are you using to make music?
I use an RC505 to loop things, so I can throw it down and and then loop it down, over and down again. I can try to show it in this camera, but I can point to it here.
Yeah. Show
just
it
for
off.
y'all to see. Looks like this. It's kind of fun. Click buttons. I can loop, 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 and overdub. I use Ableton Live 9, which is a DAW, digital audio workspace, to produce in. I have my keyboard and my mouth. So like.
Yes, let's go for it. Let's do a demo.
Like if I'm just on the freestyle fly, clicking buttons and doing stuff like that, I can rock out with some full-on stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah, beatboxing, the other fifth element of hip hop.
Oh yeah. Shout out to Dougie Fresh.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for being here and for being part of this, and thank you everybody for tuning in. To learn more about the work of Class Act Detroit, Path, Solidarity Studios, Kid Koala, and the American Folklife Center, you can visit the event page. And also to learn more about Citizen DJ, you could check out citizen-dj.labs.loc.gov. And you can go to the LC Labs website at labs.loc.gov for other interactive experiments. And we look forward to hearing what you make.